Okay, so for my next magic trick, you're going to pick two numbers and I'm going to guess one of them. So pick any two numbers that you like. But the only rule is when you multiply your two numbers together, you have to get the answer 0. So I'm going to pick one of your numbers. 0, right? This is not a very good trick, was it? All right, but that actually has a name. That's called the zero multiplication property. It says if A times B equals 0, if you're multiplying two things together and you're getting the answer 0, what has to happen? One of them has to be 0. Which one?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Either A equals 0 or B equals 0, or of course both of them could be 0. That would be okay with us. But one of them has to be 0. It doesn't matter which one. That zero multiplication property is the whole key to solving polynomial equations. So a polynomial equation is going to look something like this. Solve x squared plus 7x plus 10 equals 0. You may have wondered, why did we spend about 3 or 4 days learning how to factor? Here's why. What we want to do to solve this equation, we want to take this polynomial and we want to factor it. Can you factor x squared plus 7x plus 10?
Yes.
Yes, it factors as
5, 2.
x plus 5 and x plus 2. Now, notice what we have. I have two things, x plus 5 and x plus 2. I'm multiplying those two things together, and I'm getting the answer 0. If I'm multiplying two things together and getting the answer 0, what has to happen? One of them has to be 0. Do we care which one? No. So either x plus 5 has to be the number 0, or x plus 2 has to be the number 0. What we do is we take a polynomial equation, we factor it, and then we turn it into linear equations because we're very, very good at solving linear equations. Two answers, x equals negative 5, x equals negative 2. There are the two answers. Questions on that? All right, how about this one? Solve. X squared minus 5x equals 14. What would you do? Subtract the 14 from both sides. Why? You've got to have the 0. Why is the 0 important? No? Why is the 0 important? Because we want to set them equal to 0. Could I factor this left-hand side the way it is? Yeah, I could. But it doesn't do me any good. And this is a very common mistake that people make. So this is wrong. Don't do this. Many people will factor the left-hand side. They'll say this is x times x minus 5 equals 14. Now, here's the problem. How do you multiply two numbers together and get the answer 14? Could be 2 and 7. Could be 1 and 14. Could be 28 and 1/2. Could be negative 2 and negative 7. Could be negative 14 and negative 1. How can you multiply two numbers and get the answer 14? There's too many ways. We don't want the number 14 over there. What number do we want over there? 0. So when you have a polynomial equation, your first step get 0 on one side. That's always your first step, and sometimes people forget that. You've got to have 0 because we need to use this 0 multiplication property. The only way to multiply two things together and get the number 0 is one of them is 0. Okay? So step number 1 is going to be get 0 on one side. Step number 2 will be factor. Step number 3 will be solve each linear equation. Bless you. All right, so you were exactly right when I said, how would you solve x squared minus 5x equals 14, and you told me subtract 14 on both sides. That's exactly right. You have to get the 0. Always, always, always. X squared minus 5x minus 14 equals 0. Got to have 0 on one side. Once you have 0 on one side, what do? You factor. Does x squared minus 5x minus 14 factor?
Yeah.
Yes, it factors as x minus 7 and x plus 2. That does give you the minus 5 in the middle. We're going to have x minus 7 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. So x equals 7 or x equals negative 2. There's your two answers. Questions on that one? All right. Well, let's try some harder ones then. How about 18y cubed plus 3y squared equals 6y. How do you begin? You got to subtract the 6y. Why do you have to subtract the 6y? You need it equal to 0. That's always your first step. If it's not equal to 0, make it equal to 0. 18y cubed plus 3y squared minus 6y equals 0. How many answers are we going to get this time? 3. Why do you think we're going to get 3 answers? Because it has y cubed. When we had x squared, how many answers did we get? 2. When we have x cubed, or in this case y cubed, how many answers do we get? 3. If we had x to the 4th, how many answers would we get? 4, so on and so forth. All right, so now we need to factor this. How would you factor? You take out your GCF, which is a 3y. Very good. 3y times 6y squared plus y minus 2 equals 0. What's next? We got to factor more. Exactly. All right, so again, when I do these, I like to write my answer. It's going to look like that. I don't want to mess with that 3y all the time, so I'm going to go off to the side and factor the 6y squared plus y minus 2. What would you do to factor that? Multiply 6 times negative 2. 6 times negative 2 gives me negative 12. Can I split up negative 12 to get a plus 1 in the middle? Yes. And how would you do that? Positive 4 and negative 3. 4 minus 3 does give me 1. And 4 times negative 3 does give negative 12. That looks like it's going to work. We're going to have 6y squared plus 4y minus 3y minus 2. Split that plus y into the two pieces, the plus 4y and the minus 3y. GCF for the first group. 2y. And left over? 3y plus 2. Excellent. GCF for the second group? A negative 1. Again, we notice we have a negative out front. There's no GCF, so we take out a negative 1. Take out a negative 1. Left over? 3y plus 2. Excellent. So we have 3y plus 2. That's our GCF. And 2y minus 1. So So I come back up here, I've got my 3y, I plug in the 3y plus 2, and I plug in the 2y minus 1. So there's the hard part. The hard part of these problems is doing the factoring. The concept is easy. Get 0 on one side, then factor. Once you factor, take all your pieces equal to 0. The hard part is that little part that says factor. All right, so we did it. Now we're going to do the easy stuff. We're going to have three answers. 3y could be the number 0. 3y plus 2 could be the number 0. And 2y minus 1 could be the number 0. What's the answer for the first one?
0.
Y equals 0, because you divide both sides by 3. Y equals 0. What's the answer for the second one?
-2/3.
-2/3. And if you can do that in one step, that's fine with me. I would hope at this point you could. You recognize you subtract 2, and then you divide by 3. If you need to do it in multiple steps, do it in multiple steps. That's okay too. But I'm hoping you're getting to the point where these are pretty simple. And the last one? Y equals positive 1/2, because you've got to add 1, and then divide by 2. There are your three answers. Questions on that one? All right, I'm going to do two more problems then. How about t squared over 5 minus t over 2 equals -1/5. What would you do in order to solve that equation? Add 1/5. You got to have 0 on one side. Okay, very good. T squared over 5 minus t over 2 plus 1/5 equals 0. What's next? What's that? Factor. All right, well, we've never factored when we have fractions. How do you factor when you have fractions?
Don't you make the denominator the same and
You get rid of the fractions. That's exactly right. You look at your fractions, and you look for the common denominator. You get a 5 and a 2 and a 5. What's the common denominator for a 5 and a 2 and a 5? 10. So that's your common denominator. What you're going to do is you're going to multiply every single piece by 10. So don't let the fractions freak you out. What you're going to do is you're going to get rid of the fractions. You're going to get rid of the fractions by multiplying by the common denominator. How does that help? Well, what's 10 over 5? 2. So that's 2t squared minus, what's 10 over 2? 5. So that one's 5t plus 10 over 5, that's still 2, equals 0. So that's what you're going to do with fractions. When you have fractions, don't worry about them. Multiply by the common denominator makes all the fractions go away. Now we're ready to factor. And it's the same old thing we've seen over and over and over again, isn't it? This first number is not the number 1. So we multiply the ends. 2 times 2 is 4. I need to factor the number 4 to make my factors add up to be -5. Can I factor the number 4 to make my factors add up to be -5? -4 and -1, so yeah, I can. -4 minus 1 gives me -5, and -4 times -1 does give me +4, so yeah, we can do it. In this section, I promise you that nothing is prime. Why do I promise you absolutely that in this section nothing is prime? Well, if this didn't factor, how would you solve it? Now, there are ways, but we haven't learned them yet. The only way we know to solve at this point is to factor. So nothing will be prime in this section because everything has to factor, because that's the only way we know how to do it. So if you get prime in this section, you made a mistake. Okay, 2t squared minus 4t minus 1t plus 2 equals 0. First group, common thing? 2t. Left over? 2. No, not 2t.
T.
Just t minus 2. Because 2t times t would give us that 2t squared back. So we don't need a 2 on the first one there. What's common in the second group? We take out a negative 1. Again, there's the GCF is a 1, but we notice we have a minus in front, so we take out a minus 1. Left over. Again, we remember that when we take out this minus 1, that sign in the middle has to change. That has to be a t minus 2. And we wanted it to change anyway because we wanted those to match. We have t minus 2 times 2t minus 1 equals 0. Two answers, t minus 2 equals 0 or 2t minus 1 equals 0. Solving the first one, we get t equals 2. Second one, t is positive 1/2 because you have to add 1 to both sides. And that's a very simple mistake to make. You've got to add the 1 and then divide by 2. Yes?
When you did your negative 4 times negative 1, doesn't it need to be positive 1? Because you're adding. Oh, no, I did.
Negative 4 times negative 1 gives me the positive 4 back. That's what I needed. Other questions? All right, I'm going to do one more, and then I have some problems for you to do. Last one I'm going to do, we have x plus 3 times x minus 2 equals 24. Well, this one's really good because they already factored for us, didn't they? On the left-hand side, it's already all factored. Isn't that a good thing? No, why not? Do we have 0 on the other side? No, we don't have 0 on the other side. So this is kind of a trick one that they'll throw in there. People will look at this and think, oh, this is already factored. That's a good thing. It's only good if you have a 0 over there. What do we have to do? We have to FOIL it, and then we have to move the 24 over so that we have the 0, and then we're going to have to refactor. So don't fall into that trap. Factoring is only good when the other side is 0. So we're going to FOIL it. We're going to have x squared minus 2x plus 3x minus 6 equals 24. Then we're going to move the 24 over, so we're going to do a minus 24 on both sides. That gives us x squared plus x minus 30 equals 0. So this one, you've got to do a couple steps to get the 0 on one side first. But there it is. Now we have 0 on one side. Now, hopefully, we can factor. Can you factor x squared plus x minus 30? Yes. Factors as?
6 and 5, positive negative.
Positive 6 and negative 5. Excellent. X plus 6, x minus 5 equals 0. Also, I'll see a lot of people from here just do this. Do you really need to write down x plus 6 equals 0 and then write down x minus 5 equals 0? Maybe you do, and if you do, that's okay. But again, I would hope after you do a few of these, you can just go ahead and say the answer to this one's going to be x is negative 6, and the answer to the second one is going to be positive 5. Again, if you need to write it down, that's fine. But if you don't, if you want to go directly from here to there, that's okay with me. Questions on that?